You thought she saw you, not just your face or your body, but you, the man beneath the surface, the quiet thoughts, the silent battles, the unspoken fears. But what if I told you she never saw any of that? What she really saw was a projection, an image her mind painted before she ever truly met you. And when you stood in front of her, she didn't see you. She saw a mirror, polished just enough to reflect the fantasy she was chasing. Carl Jung warned us, not in polite psychology textbooks, but in words sharp enough to cut through illusion. He knew that people don't fall in love with each other. They fall in love with what they imagine the other person could be. And for most men, that realization comes too late. When the fantasy dies and the mask falls. She looked at you with a kind of hunger that made you feel chosen, special, seen. But in reality, you weren't being chosen. You were being cast. Not as a man, but as a character in her private film. A film she's been writing since childhood. A fantasy with no room for your flaws, your doubts, your truth. You were flattered by the way she adored you. You mistook her infatuation for intimacy. But what she loved wasn't you. It was the role you played. And once the illusion slipped, once you broke character, the disappointment in her eyes was immediate. Not because you failed her, but because you failed to fulfill the fantasy she never told you she had. Jung called it the animus, the inner masculine energy that lives inside every woman. When healthy and integrated, it guides her with strength, logic, and purpose. But when it's immature or distorted, it becomes a tyrant, a force that causes women to idolize dangerous men and reject steady ones, to chase chaos and flee from stability. This animus isn't something she controls. Most women don't even realize it exists, but it shapes everything. Who she's drawn to, who she attacks, who she turns into the villain of her story. And if you don't understand it, you'll think her reactions are about you, but they never were. They're about the battle going on inside her. A battle she projects onto you, and if her animus is fractured, she'll unconsciously test you, provoke you, reject your kindness, or punish your vulnerability, all in an effort to make the fantasy feel real. And when it doesn't, you're replaced, quietly, instantly, brutally. You believed love meant loyalty, that if you stayed solid, stayed good, stayed present, she'd stay too. But what you didn't know was that you were never the main character. You were a prop, a placeholder, a mask. The role she cast you in wasn't based on who you were. It was based on who she needed you to be. And the moment you started showing your real self, your uncertainty, your anger, your depth, she lost interest, because the man you actually are didn't match the story she was trying to tell. And here's the part that hurts. She didn't do it to hurt you. She probably doesn't even know she did it, because projection isn't conscious, it's automatic, instinctual, tragic. You were never him. You were never the fantasy. But you played along, didn't you? Because being seen as a dream is better than not being seen at all. You didn't mean to betray yourself. You just wanted to be enough. So you made yourself smaller, softer, easier to love. You bit your tongue when you should have spoken. You agreed when you wanted to disagree. You smiled when you were breaking inside. Why? Because deep down, you thought love was a reward, something to be earned. And the price? Your authenticity. You thought, if you could just prove you were different from all the others, she'd stay. But Jung warned us, the man who chases validation is already lost. Because in that chase, you stop becoming a man and start becoming a mirror, a reflection of what you think she wants. You weren't chosen. You were selected, like a costume in a play she didn't even know she was directing. And when your costume no longer fit her scene, the curtain closed. No warning. No second act. Because you weren't a person to her. You were a placeholder for something she hasn't faced within herself. Here's the paradox that tears men apart. The more available you are, the less she desires you. You think devotion makes you safe, that showing her every corner of your soul will secure her love. But what Jung taught, and what modern men refuse to hear, is that the feminine instinct isn't drawn to comfort. It's drawn to mystery, The man she can fully define will never hold her long, because the more predictable you become, the less she feels. Not because she's cruel, but because her nature is wired to respond to the unknown, the edge, the presence of something wild and untamed. And yet, most men do the opposite. They try to become perfect, the perfect boyfriend, the perfect husband, the perfect savior. But perfection isn't masculine. Presence is. And when you trade presence for performance, she feels it. She may not say it. She may not even understand it. But on some deep instinctual level, she stops trusting you. Because you're no longer grounded. You're no longer anchored. You're no longer you. You start to change. You begin to see it. The roles, the masks, the games. You stop reacting. You start observing. And that's when everything shifts. Suddenly, people get uncomfortable around you. Not because you've become cruel or cold, but because you've become clear. And clarity is terrifying. They don't know what to do with a man who doesn't flinch, doesn't apologize for his presence, doesn't shrink to fit their expectations. So they mock you, accuse you, call you distant, arrogant, emotionally unavailable. But what they're really saying is, I can't control you anymore. You're no longer the mirror they can use to feel powerful. You're not the puppet who dances when they tug. You're grounded, rooted, awake. And Jung warned us, the awakened man is not celebrated, he's feared, because he doesn't belong to anyone. You wanted to save her. You thought if you just held her tight enough, loved her deep enough, she'd finally see the truth. But that was never your job, because here's what Jung made brutally clear. No one can walk the inner path for someone else. You can't fix the chaos in her mind by being calm. You can't heal her wounds by bleeding for her. She has to face her own animus, the tyrant inside that demands perfection from men, then resents them for delivering it. She has to meet her own shadow, the parts of her she's been told are pure, innocent, and flawless, when they're anything but. Until she does, she'll keep projecting, keep casting men as gods, then punishing them for not living up to the myth. You're not her savior. You're not her father. You're not her therapist. You're a man, and a man cannot carry a woman's soul. One day, if you've walked far enough alone, you'll meet her, the real her, not a goddess, not a muse, not a mirror for your dreams, but a woman who's been through fire, a woman who's burned through her own illusions, faced her own demons, and stood unflinching in front of the mirror Jung described, the one that shows you everything you didn't want to see. And when you meet her, something inside you will settle, because for the first time, you won't feel the need to perform. She won't fall in love with your potential. She won't need you to play a role. She'll see you, all of you, and she won't flinch, because she won't be trying to complete herself with you. She's already whole. And when two whole people meet, love isn't a performance. It's a presence. It's not desperate. It's not needy. It's not consuming. It's calm, clear, true. But to get there, you must give up the addiction to being chosen. Most men quit before they ever arrive. They trade the terrifying silence of the inner path for the familiar noise of attention. They settle for being liked, being useful, being wanted, even if it means living a lie. They become actors, puppets, performers on a stage they didn't build. And when the applause fades, when the woman leaves, when the fantasy breaks, they blame her. They point fingers, call her shallow, manipulative, cold. But Jung wouldn't let you off that easy. He would look you in the eye and ask, why did you volunteer to play that role in the first place? Because that's the truth. You weren't a victim. You were a volunteer. You chose to trade your soul for affection. You chose to stay small to be accepted. You chose to be a fantasy instead of becoming a man. But here's the brutal miracle. At any moment, you can stop. The path of individuation begins the moment you stop trying to be what others want. It begins the moment you choose yourself, not in arrogance, not in defiance, but in truth. The man who no longer chases, who no longer molds himself for applause, who no longer performs for love, he becomes dangerous. Not because he harms others, but because he cannot be controlled. He can't be seduced by illusion. He can't be reduced to a role. He writes his own script. He lives by his own code. He stands alone, not because he has to, but because he can. And that kind of man, that man is rare, respected, feared, desired. But not because he needs to be, because he doesn't. Carl Jung didn't give us a roadmap. He gave us a mirror, and in that mirror, he revealed the tragedy of modern man, that we'd rather perform for love than face the terrifying truth of who we really are. He warned that men who refuse to confront their own unconscious will be ruled by the projections of others, especially women, and he challenged every man to stop seeking salvation in the eyes of someone else, because you're not here to be chosen. You're here to choose truth over fantasy, depth over performance, freedom over validation. And if you do, if you walk this brutal, silent, sacred path, you'll stop attracting women who want a fantasy, and you'll start attracting women who want the truth. Not because they need you, but because they've chosen themselves too. And that is love. Not born from fear, but from freedom. If you've made it this far, you already know. You're not like most men. You don't want to perform anymore. You don't want to play a role. You want to be. But here's the hard truth. Most won't hear this. They'll scroll away. Forget it. Keep chasing the next illusion. But you can be the one who stops the cycle. So share this. Not for me, but for the man who's still pretending. The man who thinks love means losing yourself. The man who thinks he needs to be chosen to be whole. Help him see the mirror. And if this message spoke to something deep in you, then subscribe. Join the movement, because we're waking men up, one soul at a time.